How would you describe yourself in 3 words?
I can do it in 2 words. Oh, okay, 3 words. I'm insatiably curious. I'm Neil deGrasse Tyson, your personal astrophysicist, and right now you're watching Behind the Brand with Brian Elliott.
Neil, I usually ask my guests, how did you get this job as an astrophysicist?
Oh, my specific job profile, if you want to call it that, it was not in response to an ad that said we need the person with these qualifications. And there's a lesson in there, by the way, I think. It's if you have a portfolio of what you do best and no one knows that they want it or need it, you can get hired for some of what you do best, and then they see the rest of what you can do, and then they say, can you do some of that for us? We never even knew that was something that could be done, or that could be done that well. Let's do some of that too. And so what then happens is your job description morphs to shape what you do best for the benefit of those who can justify paying you for precisely those um, those features. So I count myself among the ranks of socialized people in the world. And some of that I go back to elementary school. I was a pretty sociable kid to the point where teachers were complaining on my report cards about my social energy. And I think back then, maybe even today, when, what is a teacher's example of a perfect student? It's someone who doesn't disrupt the class, who is silent while the teacher is speaking,
Conforms.
good grades, and conform to all the rules that are put in place. And I wasn't very good at that. It was a bubbling of social energy. So here's a social energy that I now use, that I bring to bear on my podcast, my Star Talk podcast. And if I'd had that beaten out of me or encouraged to leave me so that I could silently listen to a lesson plan and then spit it back in an exam, I'd be a different person today. So I stuck with what I enjoyed and what I did best. And I think if you're lucky, that can be valued in some way, shape, or form out there in the real world. Did Elon Musk fulfill a job description in his current job? This was a space company looking for a CEO and he applied? That's not how that worked. No. Also, I spent time, this is on the side, not many people know this, I'm a big fan of calligraphy. I have many sort of fountain pens that do interesting calligraphic lines. And because not all fountain pens give you an interesting line. Some are just sort of prestige symbols that stick out of your pocket. Almost every fountain pen I own a few dozen, but almost everyone I own, it will give you an italic line or copperplate, sort of palace script kind of line. And I carry at least 3 pens with me when I travel. And one of them is what I would use if people want me to sign one of my books. And so the signature is not just a Sharpie or a ballpoint. It has some flavor interest to it. And I value when other people value that I have valued that. And because it's in their book, and it makes it a little more special for going through the same motions, basically. So here is something that I did that maybe I should have been paying attention in class, but I wasn't. My doodling was practicing my F or my R, or my capital G, which has some difficulties in it, and especially a capital S, if it's scripted or if it's Gothic. So there's some complicated letters, and I work on those, the kind of letters you'd see in an illuminated manuscript that monks would have done. And so I just find it fun that you could do this with a pen. And there are times I probably should have been doing other things, but I was doing that. And now it manifests, like I said, at book signings, and people extra appreciate that. And I appreciate that they appreciate it. Another thing, I remember, I should have been studying for a physics exam, but I was playing with a Rubik's Cube, trying to solve it. I probably blew 40 hours within 3 weeks when I know I should have been studying. And I finally solved it. And I've never looked at instructions for a Rubik's Cube. Not to this day, I haven't. So the solution is just what I came up with in it. And this ended up being a bit on Jon Stewart, The Daily Show, because he had a Rubik Cube just in the green room and I started playing with it. And the show was over. It was already filmed and everything. And there was time to leave, but I was still trying to solve the cube. And the whole staff was completely intrigued by this fact that I delayed everyone. I finally solved it. He created a piece the next day about me being distracted by the Rubik. And that's just a fun little thing. And it was because I was doing a thing, just because I was following my own star, if you will, my own compass. So if you do it and you get good at it, maybe whatever it is, maybe someone will notice. And then you get to shape a life that is derives from what you like and what you do best, rather than being forced into what someone else needs out of you.
I love that advice. It's magic. I want to go back and just sort of underscore a few things that I heard so that if the audience missed it, because it might have been subtle, I want to go back to this idea, which is, many people have talked about it. You know, Picasso said, everyone's born a child, you know, and we sort of forget how to be creative. I think about Sir Ken Robinson, who was also on this show and became a friend of mine, who talked about how we need artists just as much as we need astrophysicists, and dancers as much as we need mathematicians. It's all important. And then I started thinking of this metaphor of the calligraphy pen. Like, I think it's a beautiful piece of advice to tell people to be a calligraphy pen in your industry. In other words, don't just be a ballpoint pen that does his or her work, but like, be this calligraphy pen that's sort of special and does it in a special way, your way, whatever that is. I think it's really smart advice. Really good. Love it.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of a calligraphy pen as metaphor, but if we're going to sort of keep running with that, there's, of course, when you practice calligraphy, you are aping something else that has already been conceived and thought up about the strokes and how you connect letters and the angle that the text makes to the horizontal. And so, but once you've done that, then you have this ability. And if you do it with multiple sort of fonts, if you will, then you can make up something of your own, or you can just be expressive in whatever way you want because you have that ability, because you were training into yourself. Once you got through the formalities, the creativity is what tops that, what takes you beyond the rules. Because what is something that has been created, but it's something that no one had thought of before. That's what a creation is. And if all you do is what everyone has thought of before, you're an imitator. And there's a lot of room for imitators and a lot of money to be made, but you can't count yourself among the ranks of those who have moved the needle on the creative spectrum into the future. So yeah, I'll go with you on that. And I'll add something else, just because you started this. If you write a letter by hand, we are so many layers removed from what that act once was. And what I mean by that is, if let's say I'm writing a love letter, and just the word love in script, it's the L is beautiful, and the O and the V and the E, and that's sandwiched between other words that give further meaning to how you're using that word. The flourish that you put on the page can capture emotions beyond the strict definition of the word you just wrote down. So if you think about communication as a word with an idea that's predefined, then there's the way that you write the word that communicates extra dimensions of emotion. And I think that's what the monks were trying to do with the illuminated manuscripts. All right. How did you feel on that? They're transcribing the Bible, and the Bible is a very deeply felt thing for those who are religious. And if you don't capture that in how you're writing this, go home, take up another job. So we do this, but then the typewriter gets invented. And so now you just sort of hit a key, and that's the L and the O and the VE. So now you've removed any human attempt to layer emotion onto those words, and now you're stuck with the pure dictionary definition of what they are. Okay, well, that's what books always were. So, okay, fine. But now I can say with words how much I love you or how much I feel for you. So now I have to put in some extra words. I can't rely on my flourish for this. All right. So now I throw in some extra words there. And so now what do we have? We have emojis. Okay. So it's symbols. So if you feel for someone and you don't have the whole vocabulary of a romantic sentence, just up comes, a smiley face with a little heart, kiss heart or something. And so that is so far from pen and ink on a page that I wonder, but I'm not, by the way, it might sound like it, but I'm not value judging it. I'm just observing it. I wonder in the future, what will happen to written communication? Will it just go away entirely? Will there be a select few, the few poets and novelists who they're this, they're in a cave somewhere. They're the only ones, the keepers of written expression. I don't know, but occasionally I think that.
I'd love to talk a little bit later about AI. Elon Musk is trying to develop Neuralink, and we have digital downloads, both that can go in and maybe go out. Podcasts are capturing and documenting information. That's fascinating to me. I'm also curious about your parents. Like, did they see something in you early, or did they say, like, Neil should be a professional baseball player, or you should go into law, or be an accountant? Like, do they try to steer you into something specific?
I have a brother and a sister, and they never tried to steer us. They always gave us space to explore, to discover on our own what we want to be when we grow up. At no time was there pressure to be what they were or what they weren't, because that can happen both ways. So I would never made it to medical doctor, but my daughter is going to be a medical doctor, by golly. No, there was none of that. There was none of this pressure, but we were fully exposed to things adults can do beyond the doctor, lawyer, Indian chief list that you're handed at the time. By the way, I have a book called Neil's School Years, where I store my report cards from third grade onward, and they're check boxes. All right, and early on, it's what do you want to be when you grow up, and they give you a checklist, and so in there was policeman, fireman, baseball player, this sort of thing, and I wrote in astronomer. Okay, because there was a write-in. But they separated boys and girls. So the girls section was stewardess, secretary, mother, and I thought it was odd that the woman had the choice of being mother, but the man didn't have a choice of being father. So this is sort of the gender socialization that was going on at the time, and I even knew that. And this is in the 1960s, because that's how old I am. I didn't fully absorb how insidious it was, but I knew something was wrong about this. So, and again, I think they were just trying to be innocent. Just it's your school time. It's what it was, and maybe they were being frankly realistic. Is the little girl going to be a surgeon? All right, growing up in the 1960s, what are the chances of that? All right, so, but you never know how much this socialization was a fulfilling of its own destiny. All right, you say, well, you can't because that's how things are, but you have an opportunity to change that, and you're not in this one little book.
Well, I just think that it's appropriate to say that representation matters, and I think that you're living proof of that, or any of the female founders that we're talking about today, or the first African American president, or the first female vice president, or all these areas where there wasn't representation before, where there currently is representation. Or if you want to look at a very, very young person who is the loudest voice in climate change, that's representation. So there's lots. Representation matters.
I mean, we were just sitting back, chopping it up, reminiscing about the good old days and all that. Tracking my roots, where I came from and where I'm going. But like I say, man, always said it. It's not about the destination. It's all about the journey. It's all about the journey, baby. Ain't nothing changed but the weather. The dangling carrot that hang from the rear view. Your dreams in the past ain't nowhere near you. Backseat drivers got nothing but 2 cents. Shotgun riders too biased, they all liars. I should get an A for effort, I'm too tired, but I'm never giving up, that's why I'm kinda admired. Role model, like it or not, I gotta play it. Sugarcoat the rhyme sometimes, but still say it. Said I was quitting at 40 is just a fib. I'm still a kid that's wiping the food off of my bib. You ever wanted something so bad that you could taste it? Cried over every opportunity wasted.